Hello and welcome to episode number 264. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Nice to have you with us. When it comes to identifying a reason for why so many projects fail, then Bryan Barrow has a simple answer for you. He says that a root cause of poor project delivery is poor planning. But he also says that this is not a failure of project management, but instead, this is a failure of project leadership. So, if poor planning is the culprit, then there has to be a better way to plan our projects. Right? Yes, right. Bryan is an advocate of planning your project with index cards. So in our interview, we are going to first discuss what the problem is with planning your project using sticky notes, and then we'll look at the benefits of index card planning for your project, in particular on improved leadership, greater financial control, improved project governance, and improved cross-department team working and collaboration. And by the way, Bryan Barrow will be speaking on the topic of index card planning on April 29 at the 2014 Project Zone Congress in Frankfurt, Germany. So if you're listening to this interview before April of 2014, you can find out more at projectzonecongress.com. And now, let's put all the cards on the table. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview.
Today with Bryan Barrow, project management consultant and speaker.
Hello, Bryan. Welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Hi, Cornelius. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today here. We want to talk about how to plan your project using index cards. But before we go to the index cards, I think one of the main reasons why you came up with this approach is because the usual paper-based or post-it-based approach that people have for doing a planning workshop doesn't really work all that well, does it?
No, and it's not really to knock the use of post-it notes or sticky notes in planning, because it is a very good approach, mainly because it's collaborative. You're getting people in a room, asking people for their ideas and contributions and trying to plan the project together. So far, so good, but there are still some drawbacks. One of those being that quite often you rely on the subject matter experts and the knowledge in their heads. Another one is a low level of knowledge transfer. So you can get people in a room, get them to throw out their ideas, but it doesn't necessarily reference back to the company's project management or software development methodologies. So you can come up with projects which would seem well planned, but perhaps do not convey the right message. They don't reinforce the way that the project should be working. And then you've got things like project problems with facilities and with layout and logistics. Everything from what do you do with all the brown paper and the sticky notes you've got all over the walls, to what do you do when the sticky notes start falling off, to what do you do when you want to transport the information off the walls and into other tangible work products or artifacts. So those are the key problems.
Let's do a quick process check here, what we mean about a brown paper and post-it planning workshop. Take me through such a workshop briefly so we understand what we're talking about here.
Okay, so a number of people I've worked with before have tried to plan projects with sticky notes. So they'll get their project's charter or their project mandate. They'll work out who they need to invite to that workshop. They'll bring them all together, explain the purpose and start getting them planning. And typically it will become let's do a bit of a brain dump, all of the things that we think we need to do, and we'll put them over the walls. We'll then start talking about them. What order should they be in? How do we group them together? And at that stage, you start to find that people have to stop and check. So they first of all have to stop and check what everybody else has written. So that can take some time. Then they have to reflect on what they've seen and start adding more notes. And then you get into the first of our problems, which is rereading what people have read, understanding what they meant, and then making sense of it all. And those things together start to slow things down.
Right. You also have a very humorous approach of describing this in one of your articles. You say, and then the Post-it notes start falling off the wall and you have to put them back up, probably in the wrong place.
So As a project manager, the project manager organizes the planning workshop maybe a few weeks ahead of time so that people have sufficient time for it. Most people, though, don't really plan for the event. They just turn up expecting that because it's a sticky note planning workshop, they can do it on the day. The participants get together and they get briefed on the goal, and then they'll start to write down the key activities and milestones that they need to complete to deliver the project, or at least it's the ones that they remember this time around. Next time, they'll come up with a completely different set. And of course, because they're trying to do this quickly, they're starting to write notes. And some people have great handwriting. Some people, though, write like spiders. And then another problem we get is we have to decipher what people have written. And at that stage, you start to get people who don't really want to admit their writing's terrible, so they keep their hands down when someone says, "Who wrote this one?" Once we start going through everything, we're reviewing it, that's when the notes start falling off the floor. And you can spend the rest of the half an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, picking up bits of paper from the floor and trying to remember where on the wall they really were.
Right. And you say there is a better way. What is that better way?
The better way is to plan using what I would call index card planning. And that uses 8x5 index cards, which you can pick up at any branch of Staples or any other office stationers. The cards are used to write in big lettering with marker pens. And the information that goes on that card is then relayed onto a table. So rather than using something on the wall where you can't always see over someone's shoulder, you can see multiple perspectives. You can walk around a large meeting room table. You can put the cards on the table, which represents the time and the flow and the relationship between activities. So it's a much better way because, first of all, the index cards, the bulk of the information is based on the existing organization's project delivery methodology. So whether it's Prince or PMI or anything else, you can use it for Agile, you can use it for Scrum. All of the artifacts you expect to work on in the project become cards. So you can decide as a team whether you want to do something or not just by taking a piece of card and taking it off the table or putting it on the table. It's easy to move around without things falling onto the floor, and you get a really great overview of the project from start to finish.
So you're saying that the index cards are not used to note ideas of what I think we should do in the project, but we look at previous projects and at our methodology, and then we write down what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to create a WBS. We are supposed to create a charter, and then we put those on the table. Do I get that right?
No, it's actually a bit of both. So to start off with, if we think about some of the current problems with planning, whether you use sticky notes or anything else, there are three big problems. The first one tends to be an unclear goal. There's too much management speaking, with the purpose of a project. Instead, we need one simple goal that everybody can understand. The second one is a lack of collaboration, which means we end up with too much silo working and people planning on their own. And that then manifests as an incomplete plan, which sometimes has holes, sometimes has duplication. The benefit of index card planning is you bring everyone together. You start off by identifying the goal so that everybody understands the goal in the same way at the same time. Having done that, we then get the team together to develop a high-level milestone plan, which is unique to that project. So it is in the team's own terminology, and you supplement that with the milestones to get to achieve the goal and the work products that we need to get there. And at that stage, that is when people can contribute their own ideas or their own uniqueness. Some projects may be small and they may not need a heavyweight process. Others will be longer-term, multi-stage programs, which will include, lots of repetition or lots of repeat stages. So we get the best of both worlds. We reinforce the project methodology, but we can also add in our own uniqueness.
Mm-hmm. One of the drawbacks that you mentioned for the sticky notes is that once you have them up on the wall, you later on have to remember where they were in what exact location. Now, we're putting the index cards on a probably very large table, depending on the size of your project. Well, don't I have the same situation now that the index cards are simply on the table and I have to remember where they are?
No, you don't have that problem, and here's why. At the end of the planning stages, and typically it takes about 2 hours to plan a project using index card planning, we start off with the first 45 minutes or so, coming up with a high-level milestone plan. And once we've got it and we've checked it and everybody agrees that looks like the plan, in terms of work streams and key milestones, we stop and take photographs. So that way we can see what the high-level plan looks like. Mm-hmm. I usually bring my phone, I take a video of it, and I take multiple photographs, and I can create a complete collage if I like. Then we do the more detailed version of the plan, looking at each of the milestones and the work products that are needed to achieve that milestone. When we've done the detailed level plan, we will do the same again. Stop, take photographs. Having taken all the photographs, we know which position the card should be in. It's very easy to move the plan. All we have to do is gather up all the cards in order, wrap them up with elastic bands and take them away.
All right. In the article that you wrote about project planning with index cards, you list about 7 key benefits. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to go through these so that you can introduce these benefits a little bit more in detail to our listeners here. And benefit number 1 that you mentioned is planning with index cards is fast. You already said it takes about 2 hours to plan a project. Why is it this fast?
It's this quick, partly because you don't spend time writing out post-it notes and sticky notes and putting them on the wall. The cards are already pre-printed. If you have your own existing project management or software development methodology, you can already pre-print the cards with the names of the products. What I tend to do is on one side, I have the name of the product in large lettering, typically something like 48 point fonts. And on the reverse side, I'll have some information about what that product is. And this is where it becomes really great to convey information and knowledge to people. But the cards are pre-printed, so it's just a matter of putting them out on the table and getting people to decide whether they want to use them or not.
The second benefit is planning with index cards facilitates knowledge sharing. This was one of the drawbacks that you had for the sticky notes. Why is this a benefit here?
Well, it's a benefit because for each card, let's say if we're using a particular project management methodology, we can describe the detail of that product on the back of the card. So typically when we're starting to talk about whether we want to use a particular work product, for example, it might be a high-level design. If someone in that room does not know what high-level design is, they simply pick up the card, turn it over, and they can read it. And this facilitates knowledge sharing across teams. So if you're part of a software development team, you'll know what the software design is. If you're part of the business change team, you might not know that. But by the time they get to the end of a session, they'll come back and they'll come away with a much better understanding of what the different artifacts are and how they relate to the project.
Benefit number 3, they support collaboration. What do you mean by that?
Well, by having everyone in a room for an index card planning workshop, it helps everybody to understand precisely how the various artifacts or work products in the project relate to the bigger picture. Now, that's not necessarily different to sticky note planning, but what we do get is when people are planning using index card planning, they typically stood up moving around a table. And as people start to place things on the table, they start to understand where they fit in. Once we've gone through the whole plan, we also spend time looking at dependencies and constraints. And this is where teams start talking to each other about whether things can be delivered by a particular time or whether they need to work together to achieve a particular result.
Benefit number 4, it's easier to visualize the entire project when planning with index cards. Now, that you have to explain to me because I have done some sticky note project planning in the past, and we had the sticky notes up on the wall, and I had no problem visualizing the project. So what's the big difference between the sticky note visualization and the index card visualization that you propose?
It depends on the person doing the planning, but quite often for workshops I've been to where they use sticky notes, what they do is they plan the project, but they don't always fully consider the context. So with index card planning, what we do is we'll start off by talking about the end goal. We'll divide that goal into a number of work streams, and the team will define the work streams themselves. They'll work out what the key milestones for each work stream are and the work products. So far, so good. Then we start talking about time. And then we start talking about when the end goal needs to be delivered by and any significant key milestones or yardsticks by which a project will need to be measured. And at that stage, something really interesting starts to happen. People start to move cards around saying, well, if you want this by then, this is what we need to do. Or if you really need this by then, we might need to do it in a slightly different way. So they get a much better understanding of the context of the project. We also fold in dependencies in there. So if there are particular gateways people need to get through or standards that they need to demonstrate they've achieved, all of these things start to really play a big role in shaping the project. We have had people start to replan the project on the table in the light of the information they've had about some of the challenges they need to overcome. So it's really the context more so than the project that really gets people to see the bigger picture.
Benefit number 5, planning with index cards supports iterative planning.
Yes, it does. Planning with index cards allows people to plan either big bang projects or iterative multi-phase projects, but they can also start to iterate on that table on the day. So they can start off with one approach, and as they start to understand some of the challenges and the pitfalls and the perils of their approach, they may adjust their approach. So it's iterative even within the workshop as well as within the project itself.
Benefit number 6, you can reuse index cards. And I think I can explain this. Let me try this one myself here. Because they are pre-printed and they follow your internal methodology, you can use them again in your next project. You can just use the same index cards. Is that about right?
That's correct. You can use exactly the same index cards. Typically, I'll bring, maybe a couple of hundred blank index cards for people to write on. And that allows the team to tailor the project to suit what they think is the right approach. But the bulk of the project's already pre-printed. That saves on preparation time. It also supports consistency of approach. So if 5 people have been to an index card planning workshop before, come together for another one, they already understand what cards they're expecting to see. So they can focus their time and attention on saying, do I need to do this thing in this project? Or do I need to do that, perhaps put that to one side? The cards don't last forever. I think my record is about 4 workshops before they're tattered and torn, or someone has written all over them and I have to reprint them. But hey, I buy another set of cards, I just run them through the printer, and I print a whole new fresh set.
And finally, benefit number 7, planning with index cards ensures compliance with company standards.
Yes, it does. So one of the things that we can do with the index card approach is we use different coloured cards for different reasons. So I tend to use yellow cards for government gateways and funding points. I tend to use pink cards for all mandatory project products, whether it's the project plan, the business case, the risk management plan, some of those things which will be produced, but sometimes people don't do perhaps as diligent a job as they should do. And we use white cards for work products. Now, by insisting on making sure that we have mandatory work products built into the project and governance gateways and reviews, we can ensure that we have the right governance products in the project. And that makes sure that we support and reinforce the use of all of those standard products that we have to have within the project. By using different coloured cards, we can ensure that governance standards are adhered to across all projects.
All right, let's review the 7 benefits that we have here. Number 1 was planning with index cards is fast. Number 2, planning with index cards facilitates knowledge sharing. Number 3, they support collaboration. It's easier to visualize the entire project when planning with index cards was benefit number 4. Number 5, planning with index cards supports iterative planning. They are also capable of reusage. That's benefit number 6, up to 4 times. And then the final one, benefit number 7, planning with index cards ensures compliance with company standards. So what's the catch here with the index card planning?
I don't think there is a catch with index card planning. It's fast, it's fun, it's flexible, it delivers great results really quickly. And you get 2 sets of results. You get the tangible results that come from index card planning, which is a credible plan. It's produced by the whole team, the whole core team that needs to be involved in it, and that increases buy-in and that increases commitment. And the intangible result is an incredible team because it starts to kickstart the team formation process. It helps people put a face to a name. It helps them to work together, and they can take that working together feeling away from the workshop and into the project. So I don't really think there's a downside. Another upside is that if the project isn't viable, the team will work that out for themselves and they'll recommend that the project is cancelled. I think back in probably episode 254, you had Jack Ferraro talking about multitasking. And one of the things he talked about in that episode was about the number of people who get stretched across several projects. And that's one of the key things that comes out in an index card planning workshop, whether the project is going to be, or the people in the project are going to be spread too thinly.
Why then do so many teams still use the sticky note approach? It seems to work for them.
It works for them, but I think anything, and as I said before, the sticky note approach does work. I wouldn't want to say it doesn't work. I'm just saying there's a different way, and in my view, there is a better way. So until people believe, or until people see that there is a better way, they'll stay with what they have.
All right. While it seems pretty intuitive to do this type of index cards planning, I probably wouldn't want to go ahead and do my first planning session without getting some help here. What do we do? Can we bring in an external facilitator?
Well, you can bring in an external facilitator, or you can bring in an internal facilitator to that company. The one thing I wouldn't recommend is that a project manager facilitates their own workshop, because when they do that, they're trying to act as both project manager and facilitator. That will sometimes stifle debate. People don't always speak up and contribute in the same way if the project manager is leading. By having an external facilitator, the project manager is an attendee, a guest at their own workshop, and they can spend all of their time thinking about it from a project management perspective without having to worry about whether they got the timing right, whether they got the cards in the right place, whether they're doing the right thing. So getting a facilitator, whether an internal one or an external one, helps to ensure that you get consistent result, helps to make sure that the process itself is followed, and helps to make sure they get a great end result.
Yes, of course. And we have to mention this here. You are a facilitator. This is part of your business, right?
Yes, it is. I started facilitating index card planning workshops. I was actually introduced to the process about 3 or 4 years ago, and I had my eyes opened really wide. I saw what was going on. I thought, this is better than what I do now. I was a sticky note planner in my own time. I facilitated about 30 of those events as we were rolling out a new project management methodology. And since then, I've refined the process so that it's repeatable, so that it can work for almost anybody. So I either go in and facilitate workshops for people, or I go out and train people on how they can facilitate their own.
Do you find that the eye-opening effect of planning your project with index cards that you went through is happening to many people who attend your facilitated workshops?
Yes, I tend to have several things happen. I was approached by someone on LinkedIn. We hadn't connected, but I'd facilitated an event for him 2 years ago. And he said he saw my picture on LinkedIn. He said it made him remember the workshop. And he said he remembered how much fun he had. That's the sort of lasting impression it left. I've had people, once they've been to a workshop, they've spoken to their friends and said, you've got to speak to this guy. You've got to speak to Bryan and get him to talk you through the process. And in fact, I had someone that I knew who had worked with me before, Tom, and he called me one afternoon about 4:30 and said, I've been meaning to catch up with you. And we had a bit of a chat, and I said, so what can I do for you? And he said, I've got a workshop to run tomorrow morning, and I want to use your index card planning method. And I said, Tom, come on, get real. But we still were able to do it. I talked him through the process. I sent him over a number of checklists and tip sheets that I have. And I just said, look, go get yourself a set of cards and you can just do everything on the morning. And he did, and it worked.
Wonderful. This is a perfect segue to my final question for you, because I would like to know from you what our listeners can do other than bringing you or someone else in as a facilitator for such a planning workshop. Let's assume they have a planning workshop happening within the next week or so, not tomorrow morning like your friend. What are the 2 to 3 things that you would recommend that they do in order to improve their planning workshop and move more towards the index card planning?
Well, the first thing I would always recommend people do is devote as much time to understanding the goal and why the goal is important to the actual planning. And quite often people will jump straight into planning mode and they'll start throwing things on the wall. I think that can often be a mistake. It's much better to spend a bit of time first, making sure we understand why the project is important, why we're doing it, and what success looks like. In an index card planning workshop, the balance is about 1 hour for understanding the goal, the success criteria, what success is going to look like, and how different things will be when it's done. Only then do we go on and start talking about the project, because that builds both understanding and commitment. So that would be the first thing. Spend as much time around the goal, getting clarity. The second thing then is making sure that the team start to work together. So it's about building collaboration, whichever approach we want to use. To my mind, the important thing is to get people working as a team, so that when one team member has a problem, they start to support each other, and we can kickstart that process in the workshop, whichever method we use. And I think the third one is ensuring that people leave that workshop with a feeling and a sense of commitment and ownership. Trying to persuade people to invest their time and their emotional energy into a project when they haven't really been involved in the planning of it can be difficult. But when you get them involved and when you get them to plan and get them to take responsibility, you get a better understanding of what they need to do. You get better estimates, both timescale, resource, cost estimates, and you get them to really step up and say, yeah, we will get this delivered. So that's what I would recommend.
All right, Bryan, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Leonidas, thank you very much.
And that was Bryan Barrow and how to plan your project using index cards. And don't forget that if you are listening to this before April of 2014, Bryan will be presenting this topic live at the 2014 Project Zone Congress in Frankfurt, Germany. Find out more at projectzonecongress.com. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. And if you are a project manager who wants to become PMP or PMI ACP certified, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the Project Management Prepcast or the Agile Prepcast. And study for the exam by watching the in-depth exam prep video training from pmprepcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this question and answer here from the ASAPM website. Question: what is the difference between a project manager and a used car salesman? Answer: the used car salesman always knows when he is lying. Until next time.